Members, recess has ended. We have business to take up on the floor. I'd like to invite all members to please come to the chamber so we can begin to take up bills that are before us today. Mr. Perez, for what purpose, sir?
I'm rising to ask if we have a quorum, Madam Speaker.
Well, a quorum was established earlier today. What we are waiting on is authors or managers to present bills. But the quorum has been established as of this morning.
Thank you, Madam. So who in particular are we waiting for?
I will confirm and get back to you, Mr. Perez. Mr. Nilo, for what purpose?
Well, Madam Speaker, I'm just wondering if this would be the appropriate time to share with you and the rest of my colleagues that as of an hour and a half ago, there is another Nilo creature in the world. My number 2 son, Eric, who is a constituent of Martin Garrix, he and his wife, Carrie, had a little baby boy, as I said, about an hour and a half ago, just over 8 pounds and a slight tad over 20. The little boy is significantly bigger than his father was when he was born, so watch out, Eric.
Congratulations, Mr. Nilo. Mr. Swanson, for what purpose?
Madam Speaker, I was wondering, was that a Democrat or Republican?
Ms. Harkey, for what purpose?
To address the previous speaker, please, Madam. I would like to comment that I think it's fabulous that there's another Southern California Nilo in the district, and I'm sure it'll be a water user, right? Thank you.
Members, we are ready to convene the 7th extraordinary session. So we will now recess the regular session for the purpose of convening our 7th extraordinary session. We are now in 7th extraordinary session. Without objection, we will substitute the prayer, the pledge, other opening procedures from the regular session and the 7th extraordinary session. Motions and resolutions are now in order. And are being developed even as we speak. Members, we're going to move on now to motions and resolutions. Mr. Torrico.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There is a resolution that does pertain to Article 4, Section 8B of the Constitution, dispensing with 3 readings on 3 separate days. I would like to move to that item now as it pertains only to SB 6. SB 6.
Please read the resolution.
Resolved that Senate Bill 6 presents a case of urgency as that term is used in Article 4, Section 8B of the Constitution, and the provision of that section requiring that the bill be read on 3 separate days in each House is hereby dispensed with, and is ordered that the bill be placed upon its passage and considered engrossed.
Members, it takes Ms. Buchanan, for what purpose?
I would just like to request a roll call vote on the issue.
A roll call vote is required for this, and 54 votes are required in order to pass this. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 54, noes 10. The resolution carries. Mr. Torrico.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I request unanimous consent to allow SB 6 to be taken up without reference to file for purpose of amendments. SB 6.
This will be by Mr. Huffman. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 6 with amendments by Assemblymember Huffman.
There we go. The amendments are being presented by Mr. Huffman. You may open, Mr. Huffman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On the amendments, these amendments simply change the contingent enactment language in this bill. There's no other substantive change, and I respectfully request an aye vote.
Mr. Blakesley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this agreement to eliminate contingent enactment was an agreement at leadership to help ensure that members have an opportunity to vote for this bill based on its merits. Ask for an aye vote.
Very well. Seeing no further discussion or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. Please strike the roll. We can do this on a voice vote. All those in favor of adopting the amendment signify by aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. Mr. Torrico?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I hereby request unanimous consent to allow SB 6 to be taken up without reference to file as amended in mock-up form immediately.
Without objection. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 6 by Senator Steinberg, an act relating to groundwater.
Mr. Huffman, you may open on the bill in chief.
Bear with me one moment, Madam Speaker. I wasn't expecting the bills to come up in this order, but I'll wing it. Members, we're going to begin with the groundwater piece of this comprehensive water package tonight. And many of you may know that California is the only western state that doesn't regulate or seriously manage its groundwater resources. That's a big deal, especially in a year like this, because in a drought year, groundwater can make up as much as 40% of our state's water resources. And folks who have looked at this, analysts like the Public Policy Institute of California who've looked at this, say that if you look at the projected growth in the decades ahead, particularly in urban areas, new groundwater use is the leading source to meet new growth. So the ability to measure that and ultimately to manage it better is critical to stabilizing water supplies in the state of California and meeting the long-term economic and water supply needs of our state. Now, many of us would love to see a bill like this that goes much further. Certainly, the Delta Vision Blue Ribbon Task Force and many others who have looked at this have recommended that we go much further. This bill takes a very modest but important step by requiring, actually allowing, local entities overlying groundwater basins to report their data to the Department of Water Resources and for that data to be available publicly by the state. For those who do not do that, the Department of Water Resources is able to go in and use state and federal monitoring wells to collect that data under this bill. And there is a penalty in the form of losing one's eligibility for state grant funds if a county refuses to comply. However, there's a very important amendment that was taken last week on this bill that makes it clear that if that loss of grant funds would affect a disadvantaged community, that will not happen. So this is a bill that I hope will have broad support in this House. It's one of the critical steps that we need to take in the years ahead to address our water supply challenge and meet the needs of both our human and environmental and agricultural water demands going forward. I respectfully request your aye vote.
Mr. Adams.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Members, I must rise respectfully to disagree with what the gentleman has said concerning groundwater maintenance. To be clear, and at the risk of being anything less than fully respectful, let me just first say that I do appreciate the incredible work that the author has done to make this a bill that's tenable for all of us and something that is deserving of at least consideration. But let me take issue with one statement that was made, and that is the suggestion that we have not been involved in groundwater monitoring or that we don't do groundwater monitoring. Please make no mistake about this, my friends and colleagues. We in Southern California, and I dare not speak for those in parts of the state that I don't know or represent, but trust me, in Southern California, we are immeasurably well qualified and able and competent to monitor our groundwaters, to monitor our wells, and to make darn sure that we are being good stewards of this incredibly precious resource. Please don't ever fall victim to the lie that we have not been diligently doing this. The men and women who manage our groundwater basins in Southern California and in my district specifically have worked immeasurably hard for decades to try to do exactly what it is that this bill seeks to do on a statewide basis. And I have to rise with some degree of umbrage at the suggestion that we haven't been doing our job. I understand the need to take a statewide approach to this, but I do want, for the record, to clarify that good work is being done to manage groundwater in my district and throughout Southern California.
Mr. Berryhill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I, too, rise in opposition to this groundwater monitoring. I think, I came up here not to hire more bureaucrats, not to make government more intrusive on all of our lives, not to run businesses out of California, but we love to set fees. One of the things when I first ran was I was frustrated because I was being feed to pay somebody to come and regulate me. And there's just something that I have fundamentally that I think's wrong with that. I think this is also another way going forward to look at groundwater and start to say, you know what, if you've got groundwater, then you don't need your surface water. And that's a mistake. It's not in this language, but I'll guarantee that's coming down the line. This is one step closer to taking our groundwater rights away, and I strongly, strongly urge a no vote. Thank you.
Ms. Galgiani.
I want to rise in support of the bill and thank the author for taking the amendments over the weekend that removed the opposition and the concerns from the ag community. There were concerns that the bill would be harmful to some of our small farmers in the community. After a lot of conversation and work back and forth, amendments were taken that are greatly appreciated, and agriculture has removed their opposition, and I stand in support of this bill. Thank you.
Seeing no additional debate or discussion, Mr. Huffman, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'll begin my close by apologizing to my colleague from Southern California. There are absolutely some local entities that do a great job of both monitoring and managing groundwater on a voluntary basis. So I meant no disparaging comment there to those who are doing it. Unfortunately, that is the exception in many parts of the state. And so what this does is it brings the entire state closer to the great work that's happening in Assemblymember Adams' district. I do want to point out that this is not the measurement of your groundwater use. Nobody is going to be going to private wells and measuring how much water you're taking out of the aquifer. It's important to distinguish that. This is simply measuring the depth to groundwater so we can get a handle on where we're having serious overdraft. And overdraft happens, especially in dry years. It's begun to happen in the Central Valley in this third year of a drought, to the point where subsidence is even, some fear, threatening the integrity of the California aqueduct in some places. It's a very, very serious problem. And without the authority provided in this important bill, we really have no ability as a state to know where our groundwater aquifers are being overdrafted so that we can manage this critical resource, again, in a drought year like this, 40% of our state's water supply. Lastly, I just want to respond to a little bit of the black helicopter stuff, that this is the beginning of government coming in to seize all things that you own. It hasn't worked that way in other states that actually go much, much further than this, that actually regulate the withdrawal of water from groundwater aquifers. Even the state of Texas, that has its own concerns about black helicopters, has gone much further than this. So I'm going to respectfully request your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Mr. Huffman? Mr. Huffman moves a call. Mr. Torrico?
Returning to motion resolutions, please, Madam
Without
Speaker.
objection.
There is a resolution at the desk pertaining to Article 4, Section 8B of the Constitution, dispensing with 3 readings on 3 separate days. I would like to now move to that item once again.
Without objection. Which bill will this apply to?
I apologize, Madam Speaker. SB 7 by Senator Steinberg.
SB 7. Clerk will read the resolution.
Resolved that Senate Bill 7 presents a case of urgency as that term is used in Article 4, Section 8B of the California Constitution, and that provision of the section requiring that the bill be read on 3 separate days in each house is hereby dispensed with, and is ordered that the bill be placed upon its passage and considered engrossed.
Mr. Torrico?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I request unanimous consent to allow Mr. Fear to take up.
Oh, one moment, please. We need to vote on this. I thought you had something to add to the resolution. Members, this is a roll call vote, and 54 votes are required. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 54, no 7. The resolution is adopted. Mr. Torrico.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Under motion resolutions, I request unanimous consent to allow Mr. Fear to take up, without reference to file for purpose of amendments, SB 7 by Mr. Steinberg.
Without objection, clerk will read.
Senate Bill 7 with amendments by Assembly Member Fear.
You may open, Mr. Fuhrer.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The amendments simply reflect the removal of the language that would require contingent enactment of this bill and others before us. Urge an aye vote.
We're just getting the information on the board, and then we'll take this up on a voice vote. There we go. All those in favor of adopting the amendments, please signify by the usual sound of aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. We can now move on to the bill in chief. Clerk will read. Oh, Mr. Torrico?
Under motion resolutions, request unanimous consent to allow Mr. Fear to take up SB 7 without reference to file in mock-up form immediately.
Without objection. Now the clerk will read.
Senate Bill 7 by Senator Steinberg, an act relating to water.
You may open, Mr. Fuhrer.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. This bill has been a couple years in the making. 2 years ago, a little bit more than that actually, we began in this House an effort to organize a comprehensive approach to water, and including a discussion of what might be included in a bond. In the course of the work of a working group on that bond, it became clear that if nothing else in California, we need to be making as efficient use as we can of the scarce water we have. And this bill came about. And the theme of the bill is this, that everyone in the state has a role to play in efficiency and conservation. That's particularly true when we consider that every study says the same thing, that the least expensive, most cost-effective means of increasing the pool of water we have to rely on in the future is through efficiencies and conservation. So this bill began to take form. The governor then called for a 20% reduction in urban per capita water use by 2020. And we embedded that in the bill last year. This bill before us continues that focus on a statewide target of a 20% reduction in urban per capita use by 2020. The bill has gotten increasingly flexible during the course of those 2 years. This is not a top-down bill. This is a bill that relies heavily on local decision-making and local control. It allows local water agencies to pursue one of 4 pathways to achieving the goal, which in the aggregate will lead to this 20% reduction by 2020. It also calls for a measurement in 2015 of how far we've come and a potential recalibration of that. It is very flexible with regard to the urban piece in many ways, including giving urban water agencies the opportunity to choose how to make this conservation happen through residential, commercial, indoor, outdoor, whatever combination a local jurisdiction sees fit, it can pursue. The bill also pertains to agriculture, although I should preface that reference by saying something I said when this bill first came to the floor earlier this year. I am very aware, as are the proponents of this bill as a whole, that in the last year we have seen farmers, in the Valley in particular, being unable to get the loans to buy seed. Why could they not get those loans? Because they couldn't rely on a water supply, and those lenders wouldn't supply the money for the seed in the absence of that water being available to them. And so this bill does take a different approach to agriculture than it does to urban water use. And in particular, it says you need to manage your water. That may seem like nothing of consequence until you consider that that requirement has not been in place previously, except for the CalFed. The bill also says that there are some basic best management practices that ought to be employed by agriculture. And so it lays the foundation on the ag side. Not nearly as vigorous, agreed, as on the urban side, but it lays the foundation for us to be able to say to everybody in California that every sector of our population is going to contribute to increasing this most cost-effective pool of available water for our future. So with this in mind, as you've seen, the support for this bill has grown exponentially and includes a wide swath of support from every sector of California. With this in mind, colleagues, I'll conclude with this point. If we do nothing else, we ought to be able to go back to our districts and say, we took strong efforts to assure that we were as efficient with our water as we can be. But when I presented this bill earlier in the year, there was a critique of the bill, not in its content at all, with one exception, but the critique was we ought not take this bill out of sequence. Conservation, it was said by opponents then, is truly crucial. Our efficiency, of course, has to happen, but it needs to take place in the context of a comprehensive solution to California's water crisis. Well, I'm here today to say that we have kept faith with what I articulated then, which was we'd come back with a comprehensive approach to water, of which this is one, but one crucial piece. In the spirit of that, I urge an aye vote.
Mr. Arambula.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When this bill was heard earlier in the Assembly, I rose and spoke against it, and I voted against it because of the reason that Mr. Fuhrer just mentioned. It was not at that time part of a comprehensive package. It is now. That's why I'm very pleased to rise in support of this bill, as with all other elements of the comprehensive package. I do believe we need to conserve. I do believe we need to find ways to reuse water. I do believe we need to clean up contaminated water. We need to help rehabilitate the Delta. We need to find additional ways to provide for surface and underground storage. In short, we need to do everything. This is part of an overall package. Today I rise in very strong support of this package as well as other elements of the package, and I would urge my colleagues to do likewise. I think at the time when I spoke against it, it was not because of the policy. It is good policy, but it was not linked to a comprehensive solution. It is now, and I'm very pleased to support it in this form.
Mr. Emerson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Like my good friend and colleague from Fresno, I also opposed this measure when it came to the floor of the Assembly. I rise in strong support of this proposal today because we must be more efficient in our use of water. I would like to point out to my friends in the Delta, in the agricultural areas of the state, the requirement for agricultural water suppliers to implement volumetric pricing has also been removed from this bill. We have got to be much more efficient in our use of water in the state, and I ask for your aye vote on this measure.
Mr. Nilo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Like my good friends and colleagues from the San Joaquin Valley and Southern California, I opposed this bill before, and I oppose this bill now. Northern California, the areas of origin, are willing, certainly, to help with our more generous supplies of water, the plight of those to our south with not much water. But we're not willing to do it at the point of our own peril. And frankly, this whole package is at our whole peril in many respects. And I'm not really even sure where to begin, but let me try. First of all, the conservation targets, the expectations, are wholly unfair. Our area, the area from which the water to help Southern California out and other areas, is expected to achieve a 20% conservation of water by 2020, whereas other areas to where the water's going, primarily, are expected to conserve to about a quarter of that rate. Now, that is perceived to be fair because the per capita water use in the northern area, the Sacramento metro area, areas up here, is higher than it is elsewhere, and I will not dispute that point. But one must acknowledge the fact that the areas have developed with the water supplies that existed, and we have a lifestyle that goes along with it, but it's not like we have not been efficient water users. We spent 7 years in the Sacramento metropolitan area in an effort called the Water Forum, and cobbled together very difficult but comprehensive agreements for the use of water from our groundwater sources and the American River watershed, with agreement from environmental interests, water purveyors, business interests, etc., to actually increase diversions from the American River in a way that still restored the ecological health of that river in a fashion that it really satisfied our water needs out to the year 2030. This whole package puts that in peril. But we also have a very efficient wastewater treatment facility, which by this package is also threatened, and hopefully I'll get a chance to talk about that some more. But if you take the water that comes into this area and the water that leaves the area through the treatment, our per capita water use actually drops down substantially in any case. Now, I believe that that is unfair at the outset, 20% versus 5%. But there's also the chance that if we do not achieve these savings, that the deficiency will be deemed to be unreasonable water use or wasted water use, and actually can be taken away from our underlying water rights. Now, it is true that the bill allows for relief from that until the year 2020, but that indeed is when the requirement kicks in. Now, the water rights issue is one of the fundamental problems with this whole package also. I am told, and my constituents are told, that there is nothing in any of these bills that compromises underlying water rights, and in fact there is some language that provides assurance to existing water rights, and that is arguably true. But there are gremlins in these proposals that actually end up restricting our ability to exercise our water rights eventually.
30 seconds, Mr.
It is like saying, I don't challenge your right to use a car, but I am going to restrict your use of it from time to time. Our water rights can indeed be threatened by the tenets of this bill. I urge a no vote out of the principle that it is fundamentally unfair. We're willing to help out the areas that need the water, but don't do it in a way that compromises our underlying legal, long-standing right to divert water from our sources up here in Northern California.
Thank you, Mr. Nilo. Ms. Buchanan.
Thank you, Mr. Don. Thank you, Madam Speaker and colleagues. Water is a finite resource. You know, whatever we do, we're not going to create more water in this state. So as the population grows, there's no doubt that conservation is going to play an increasingly important role in the state of California. It's a sad day, though, in this legislature when we write legislation with 5 people behind closed doors, spend weeks amending it, one amendment after the other, and then sit here today and vote on it when we haven't had the opportunity to have the proper hearings or to actually even read all the words in the bill, given the latest amendments. But there are a few things I want to say. One is, over and over again, whether you hear federally elected officials or state elected officials, we want to blame job loss, or we attribute great job loss in agriculture to the drought. That simply is not true. Any of you can go to the State Employment Development website and look at what the actual job loss numbers are. If you want to take a look at the numbers from September 2008 to September 2009, there's been a 1.7% drop in farm employment and a 4.9% drop in non-farm employment. We've lost 6,800 farm jobs, 732,650 non-farm jobs. The unemployment in this state is the result of the subprime mortgage crisis and the 25% unemployment rates we're having in the construction industry. So please don't attribute any job losses to water. Secondly, urban use accounts for 20% of all the water and agricultural 80% of all the water. We're asking urban users to cut back 20% when many of them, as has been stated here, have been on have implemented many water-saving conservation programs for years and years and years. We're asking industry to cut back 10%, and we're not setting any goals at all for agriculture. The grape growers in the Livermore Valley are on drip systems. They manage their water very efficiently. There are many things we could do to use water more efficiently in agriculture, but this bill does not require any kind of conservation in agriculture. And if you think about it, 20% of 40% is a 4% total reduction. If agriculture was just required to meet a goal of 10%, and I'm not suggesting that it even be spread evenly, you could have different goals in different parts of the state, that would be an 8% reduction. So I believe this bill is flawed. I believe that we should be conducting our business in the light of day. We should have proper hearings. We should have proper LAO analysis. And I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Buchanan. Mr. De La Torre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of these measures, of this measure. As has been mentioned, when we've had this discussion on similar legislation, everybody was asking for comprehensive, that it be part of a broader package. It doesn't get much broader than the multiple bills that we're going to be voting on here today. In terms of what the bill is focused on, it acknowledges the fundamental fact that our water resources are finite, that we need to reduce our water consumption or limit its growth, that by doing that we will reduce our water-related energy demands, that we will make improvements in the quality of receiving waters related to reduced discharge, which is a significant problem up here. And I want to acknowledge that in Southern California, we have been doing a lot of these conservation measures for a long time. In fact, in the city of Los Angeles, for the past 25 years, the water in LA has been stagnant. They've used roughly the same amount of water for the last 25 years, despite a population growth of over 1 million people in those 25 years. Same water use, over 1 million people more. That only came about because of conservation. Throughout the Southland, our population has increased by 33% since 1982, and the total water demands have grown by about 20%. Again, much behind population growth. It is not a one-for-one transfer. It's not, if you're smart about your water use, then you don't need to constantly grow the water consumption that's coming from Northern California. All this legislation says is that statewide, we need to have conservation measures. Statewide. That's not a dramatic ask in a state where we have, again, this acknowledged finite resource. And I could also comment on the Water Forum, which had a set of 16 goals, conservation goals, that they set out in 2000 for this capital region that was referenced earlier. Only one of the water entities in this area had made progress on all 16 of its conservation goals by 2006, and overall, only half of the goals were achieved by 2006. So what that leads me to believe is that here in Northern California, they acknowledge the need for it, but they have been unable or unwilling to follow through on it. And maybe what they need is legislation like this with broad goals, with the flexibility to implement at the local level how they are going to finally follow through on those conservation measures. I urge your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. De La Torre. Ms. Caballero.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I just want to remind this House that this is not a new topic. This is not something that we haven't seen before. We've been working on this for the entire year, and that this is a reasonable approach to water conservation, and I ask for your aye vote.
Ms. Huber.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to echo the concerns of my colleague, Mr. Nielo, and also the concerns of Assemblymember Buchanan on the process. I think we all know that there's a division here in the membership on what is the right numbers for conservation and how do we strike that balance between agriculture and between the water rights that are already longstanding and existing in Northern California, and I don't think that this bill achieves that balance. So I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Huber. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Furey, you may close.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'm going to be very brief in my close, as I want to address those who have expressed a concern about process, because the concern, with due respect, is utterly misplaced. With regard to the question, is the core content of this bill something we've seen before? Not only is the core content the same, but let's talk about the changes and how limited they've been since the bill has been evolving over the course of the last months here, with extensive hearings here, indeed over the course of the last couple of years here. The major change that most people would focus on is there is an additional pathway to enable an urban supplier to comply with the bill. Not a subtraction of something, but the addition of one. And what's that new pathway? If an urban supplier isn't satisfied with the three pathways that were originally in the bill, it can go to DWR and SDWR to take account of all their unique circumstances and incorporate those circumstances into a new approach that they can take. So yes, if you're not a fan of increased flexibility for your area, then I guess you would say that the process has been flawed because you've been given additional tools. But that, I don't think, is anybody's real concern. So I think we should kind of strip away extraneous or unspoken concerns here and focus on the merits of this bill. Its merits to which we have had bipartisan speakers today indicate are fundamentally necessary for the future of the state of California. I have to say I really appreciate the broad spectrum of ideological support for this bill from both parties because, as I said in my opening, I'll conclude with this. If nothing else, each of us will want to return to our constituents at the conclusion of this water policy debate and say that with their scarce tax dollars and with scarce water resources on the table, we took every step we could to assure the maximum efficiency in our state at a time we can afford nothing less. Thank you, colleagues. Urge an aye vote.
All discussion having ended, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 45, noes 12. The bill passes. Mr. Torrico. Members, language on additional bills that will be taken up this evening is still being worked out, so we will now recess under call. Members, we are still under recess. Please plan to return to the chamber at 8 p.m.